Hello, my name is Rachel Norris and I've just started working with embossing copper. So I was going to show you how to turn flat copper sheet into these embossed tiger and Chinese symbol designs, and you can incorporate these designs into making a full necklace just like this one. And I'll go through in this longer video exactly what you need to help you develop these techniques and to make the design. So I hope you enjoy watching the video. Here are the ingredients that you need for this project. I've got 2 gauges of wire, and forgive the state of the wire reels, they've also come out of their reels, but there's 1mm wire for the framing round the copper sheet, and 0.4mm wire, which is a thinner gauge. It's all bare copper wire, and this will be used to attach the frame wire, and we're going to protect the edges of the copper sheet with these wires. I've got some a graduated strand of jade, which I thought would be beautiful to go with the copper and would go with the sort of Chinese tiger theme, but you can really put anything with copper, turquoise, amazonite, amethyst, all the sort of beautiful colours will go really well. And I've got some lovely 0.3mm diameter copper sheet. It's really malleable, it's soft and easily formed, but strong enough not to deform once you've made it into tiger. You can feel that it's, once you've made it into a tiger, it's sort of quite rigid and quite strong. So but I do feel the edges need to be protected, so we'll do that, use the wire gauges to do that. So those are really the basic ingredients, and we'll look at some of the tools that we'll need to make up the project next. Types of tools you'll need will change during the course of the project, and I'll go through any additional tools that I think of as we reach each stage, but these are the ones I think we'll need at the start. So you'll need, for the wire working of the frames around a copper sheet, you'll need a hammer and steel block, you'll need round nosed, chain nosed and flush cutter pliers, and the round nosed and chain nosed pliers are used for manipulating the wire and changing the shape, and the cutters of course to cut the wire, and the hammer and the steel block to sort of work harden and flatten sections of wire. So we'll go on to the next set of tools. The next set of tools are sort of the embossing tools, and these look like confusing, but they're all basically the same tool, but just different types or brands or whatever, and they all have the same object end, which is a small little ball at one end. Let's pick this one from Beadsmith. There's a small ball at one end, and you can use it to inscribe or push a line into the copper sheet. And it's quite nice to have sets with maybe different sized balls at each end, so you can sort of make large or deeper grooves or things like that. But they basically, this set and this set are exactly the same. There's another set with just different handles, so you can get them all over the place, and they're the sort of tools that you use. So you probably only need sort of 1 or 2 of them anyway. So sometimes, and if you haven't got one and you're just wanting to start out and try it, just use an old ballpoint pen, and you can use them to make the grooves in the wire as well, in the copper sheet as well. So you can use even an old ballpoint pen, but you'll get a slightly smoother and better result if you use these specially designed tools. The next tools you'll need are sort of cutting tools. Once you've got your pattern embossed into the copper, you need to be able to cut it out from the sheet to use it as your components for necklaces and designs. So if you've got a pair of these shears, you can use them to cut basic straight lines usually, and if you're very careful, some circular lines. But it's really better to use a jeweller's saw with about a 3 or 4 blade. They have little sizes in these little blades, and I'll explain a bit more when we actually do use it, but little blade like that, and some beadwax to lubricate the blade, and you can cut your shapes out of the copper. Things you'll need to have available is something to sand down or file down the edge of your copper sheet. Now I've got lots of alternatives, and you can use obviously big files, you might have them in your toolbox to file down the edges. Might have a set of needle files, and you can actually use them to do the same thing, to file down the edges. And I've got some emery boards, which you can use. You might have even some of those from doing your nails or whatever. You'll have something around to soften down the edges. And I've got some sanding blocks of different grades, and 220 is the finer and 80 is the coarser, for example, so the numbers work up. So that to make your first edges, use that to sand, and then these finer grades to make it all lovely and soft and smooth. So you've got all these different things. You might only have one of these things in your toolbox, and you can use them, these pads will do, or just the files, whatever. You'll be able to make your edges nice and smooth. So don't panic, you don't have to have the whole lot. It's just all the alternatives you've got to use if you have them. You'll need something to be able to put holes in your copper sheet, unless you treat this like a cabochon, and actually you're really good at wire wrapping or beading, in fact, and you can actually trap this with wire, and you don't need to put holes in it if you want to just treat it like a cabochon and wire work around it. But I'll usually put a hole in somewhere along the way, because you might just want to have this suspended from a jump ring, or I'm going to be using it to attach the frame to. So there's some alternatives here, some high-tech and low-tech. I've got a really simple hand drill that you use to make a hole in the piece, and actually, because it's 0.3mm wire, it goes through really quickly. And I usually use these anyway to make the guide holes for the drilling. There's a Dremel that gets you through multiple holes really quickly, and you can get the work done really quickly with one of these, and they're absolutely useful. Dremel with a Dremel little drill. But actually these little hole punches are fantastic. A 1.5mm hole, as long as you work out where to put it and it's quite near the edge, you can actually make the holes pretty quickly with this really simple low-tech tool that just drills in a hole and punches it in for you. So there's some alternatives that you might have in your toolkit for making holes in the copper sheet. This cork board is useful for everything, for working with a copper sheet, for using to protect your work surface from drilling. So I usually sort of drill a piece of copper over one of these cork boards and mats. They're fantastic. And also when you're doing the embossing, it's got a really soft surface when you're actually doing the embossing, and it'll help you score those grooves into the surface really easily, and then you'll need a hard surface for the other part of the technique. So so there we go. So that's, I think, most of the tools. If I pick up anything else during the demonstration, I'll mention them, but as long as you've got some of those, and remember that you don't have to have everything. There's usually alternatives. I've shown you alternatives with all of the different parts of the sets of tools that you need. Other useful things that might be helpful, obviously a pen and paper to do some drawings with. You'll certainly need some of these indelible markers, because they mark on the copper. I did try carbon paper, but it didn't seem to work very well, so I was hoping that would, but it didn't. So these are fantastic for marking if you want to draw your drawings directly onto the copper. So I think we'll go on to the templates next. Oh, this soft bead mat, brilliant. It's also good for embossing onto if you don't have one of those cork mats, that's if you've got that, you can actually use that as a basis for your soft embossing onto. Okay, let's have a look at the templates next. So you can either you can draw onto the copper directly yourself, but I find it easier when you're starting out to use some templates to help you. If you search for copyright free images or drawings, it must be copyright free on the internet, and print them out, and you can use them. Here's an image of a tiger in different sizes. You can screenshot this and print them out, and that's easy because this is symmetrical, so it doesn't matter whether you have for example, the groove side front facing or the embossed side front facing, and because it's symmetrical, it doesn't matter which side faces up. But when you do writing, if you draw onto something and and you groove into it, and you want the embossed, the bit that's pushed out at the front, this is what you've drawn onto it, and you want the embossed bit to be front. Remember, you have to do it in mirror image because this will reverse itself. So what I've done is given you a front-facing sort of tiger and a mirror image tiger, so you can choose. So for example, with this one, you've got the embossed brave, I think it's brave, indented in, and I've used the normal way of writing, for example, but to create this one, I've had to write onto it or score into it with a mirror image version, so that the bits that's pushed out comes out in the right orientation on the other side. So in these templates, I've given you tiger and mirror image tiger, and I've also got some other characters which I'll bring up now, and you can screenshot these too. You've got lark, happiness, and you've got the mirror image of those words, and strength as well. And if I move the template up a little bit, you've got some more. You've got brave, and that's mirror image version, courage, loyal, brave and true, and that's the mirror image versions. And then a few other Chinese symbols here. Again, if I just put it straight for you, you've got the front facing version if you want to have it with the indented side facing you, and then if you want to score into it, so the embossed side eventually is the one side facing you, use the mirror image version, and you can use those to create your symbols, and so you won't have reverse stuff facing if you don't want it. So screenshot all those and use them. You can use anything really when you're embossing to make your pattern, but this is for this project. Here you can see I've cut out some of the templates and attached them to the copper sheet with a bit of sticky paper. It's far better to use masking tape, but I don't have any at the moment. And you can always hand draw it. So, you know, if I'm going to do a tiger that's embossed and I want to just draw it with the marker pen, so you can see it actually in the light. I'm going to move it over a little bit. I can always do it like so. And if you're clever enough and you want to do your own hand-drawn image of anything, you can do it yourself. So just spend a bit of time. Obviously this is done really quickly, and you know, I'm not a native Chinese writer. I've never written in Chinese before, so they'll probably just absolutely laugh. Anybody who can properly draw or write in Chinese will laugh at what I've done, but it'd be about like a 3-year-old's attempt. But you know, you can get the symbol onto there yourself, but it's usually much better just to use a template just to get it right if you want to use that. So we're going to move on to making some of the first indentations and shapes you can see in that copper. Now the reason you can see I've got a left hand and right hand or mirror image, that's the right way round. If you want to show an indented form on your front, this is the way you do it, but I've actually reversed or mirror image form, and you get the embossed. When you turn it over, the embossed form comes out the other side, and that'll be the right way round. So that's the reason why I've given you those left and right handed shapes. So I'm going to move on to making some of the first embossing sort of scrapes into the copper. Now again, showing you all the little tools you can use. If you haven't got anything and you just want to make a start, use an old ballpoint pen. But if you've got any of these little embossing tools, the little ballpoint balls of end, these are really good and perfect for making these first indents. So I'm just going to start on these tiger shapes and show you the first grooves in. So you need to press quite hard. I'm going to use a small ball end just to start away, and I'm going to start to just make some scoring or really deep pressure. I'm using a soft mat to go mark it on. Do you know what? I'm going to use a ballpoint pen just to mark through first of all. Do you know why? Because it helps direct and stops tearing at the paper, because the ball is used to rolling along the paper. So I think the first marks are probably easier if you're using a template to use a ballpoint pen, and then you don't lose your your template that you're using. Look, you can see I've lost a little bit of that. So that ballpoint pen will help stop that happening. So really score in as deep as you can. And press as hard as you can over the copper, and if you turn it over you won't get much of a shape. You can see the start of it coming through. Can you see that start of it? So go over it a few times. I'm going to do it on the other shapes. I'll show you a little bit of the tiger in the longer version, but I'm going to go over the other shapes and then come back to you. You can see in this hand-drawn version how easily the copper marks, oh, I just fractured my pen, how easy the copper marks, but I am pressing quite hard. That's why you just use an old pen that you don't care about, because if you do bust it, you know, a cheap ballpoint pen will do, just to start it off. And you can use the embossing tools to deepen that embossing. You can see that I've started to make some marks in the copper there. I'm going to carry on with the other shapes. Before I move on to doing the big tiger shape, I'll show you that if you start to lose your pattern, basically it might be a good idea just to take off some of this this first pattern. You can see you've made some scoring shapes, and use a bit of Sharpie just to go over the shapes that you've got. There we go, just a little bit of Sharpie pen in there, or indelible marker, or anything that's permanent. Go over this, and then you've got it to mark over, and then you're not going to worry about that paper going. I'm just going to do that with the others. Here you can see I've gone over the indentations with a bit of Sharpie or a permanent marker, just to make them really easier to work with now. And so I'm just going to keep on going, just doing a little bit more work. These lines, you can see I'm pressing quite hard. You can take breaks in between these, pressing quite hard just to get these lines as indented from this side as I can. And then we're going to do some work on the other side in a moment. Just going to start working on this tiger, and remember I'm just going to use that ballpoint pen to work through the template first of all. This will take longer to do, and you also don't have to use all the lines on the tiger template. You can just use some or all of them depending on how close and fine you think you can get your lines. So I'm going to use these outer ones here. I'm not going to use this inner little section here. So I'm just going to get these jagged lines for the outer face. Careful, if your paper does start tearing, just remember just to keep following those biro lines, and follow the scoring lines, and don't go off track if you can help it. So I'm just going to ignore this bit because I just want to keep that shape here, and I'm just going to do this side fork because that's quite an important part of the tiger's face. The fork to the side of the face. Quite a lot of the tigers in real life have this, and I'm pressing quite hard. I'm going to ignore this little shape here, but I really want to work on the eye. I'm going to get this bit done here, and I actually want to make this really stand out. I want a deep and wide section here. And then I'm going to do quite a big eye actually, because in fact to get this embossing of the internal part of the eye, I need quite a slightly larger eye than this template. So I'm going to use this line here and press into here, and then start to make a dot for the eye. Okay, so I'm going to carry on, just keep on going around this ear and round. Okay, and then I just need to make a zigzag. I think I only did like a V here. I'm not sure whether it all come out, so we'll see how it goes. And I definitely want the middle section of the stripes, so I'm going to turn the piece and start working from here and get this middle curve. That's really important as part of the face and the forehead. Really press, and I'm going to go over these again, of course, once we take the paper off. I'm just making these initial sort of scratches and marks with this biro, just because that rollerball just helps really helps mark through a template a bit more easily than the styluses. And then we can get in with the styluses of the I'm only going to use one of these lines actually, because again I can't get them as quite as fine. One line here, and when you take the template off you can just make sure all these lines are balanced. I'm going to go back in over the ear on this side. I will work around the other side of the face, but I just want to do the nose section. This might not come out, but we'll see how it goes. Come back to the eye. I'm going to do the nose section, and then we'll do the other half of the face. Now, I definitely want this, so I'm going to use this on this side. Really pressing as hard as I can to get this first scratches done. And I'm going to do 2 marks. 1, 2 for the whiskers. 1, 2, and then I definitely want this chin, this lovely chin of the tiger. So I'm going to move around the muzzle, press in. Again, this can be quite tiring. You know, take breaks, especially if your hands get sore a little bit. Just take breaks, and then you can always come back to it. That's the whole thing. It doesn't have to be done all in one go. And let's do a bit of that nose. I definitely want the side of that nose as a line there, this side here, and then we'll get this nose done. Now I don't think I'll be able to get all the detail in, but let's see how we go. So I want definitely this V here, or this Y at this nose point here, and I want to create some of this shape around in a curl like so. Now I'm going to work on the other side of the face, and then we'll take that template off and make the marks as well. And then we're going to go on to do a bit more embossing with the reverse, the reverse turning and things like that. Now you can see I've worked around the whole of the tiger's face, and I've gone over as much as I can before I take the paper off, over the lines and scoring lines I've made just with the biro, because this is just this stage I'm not going to ruin the paper. And then what we're going to do is take it off and see how much we've got, and then mark over this with a marker pen. So let's have a see what we've got. You can always, if you're very careful, just peel off one side. Let's peel it off at the top, see what we've got. I've got pretty, I think I've got a pretty good tiger indentation there, look. So that's what I'm going to work with. Can you see what I've got there? So I'm just going to mark over that with a bit of Sharpie. Sorry about the woofy dog. I'm going to mark over that with Sharpie. You woofing, you woofing. And then I'm going to mark over that with Sharpie and then come back to, if I've got a fine one that might just mark over. So I'm going to do that just so that I've got these lines a bit more defined and it's easy for me to work over them without, I suppose, without slipping off, because I haven't got the template, the paper template to help me. So I'm going to do that and then come back to you. Right, what I've done is I've marked over the tiger. Now I've taken off the template, and you can see where I've joined in some bits. What I've done is accentuated some of the whiskers on the ears and things like that. You see, I haven't quite completed that section, so let's make that so mirror imaged and balanced. So make sure you do that. So that went and then back towards the ear, I think. And then as long as these are all balanced and the tiger looks symmetrical, then what we're going to do is now just work on making some more deeper embossing. So I'm going to go over all these shapes and see, you can see, start to see the start of the tiger and start of the embossing through on the other side. Now the difference with this tiger is I'm going to use the indented side as my front for the actual tiger, because I felt actually it came out better and more defined for a tiger shape, whereas I'm going to use the embossed shape, the bit that comes out of the back, for the main focal above the tiger. And I'll just show you one I'll make with the indented one as well. So you know, so actually we're going to use this technique to create different, quite different, or I have different requirements from the technique. So I want this one to be the front for the tiger. I want the back to be the front facing part for the actual symbol. So going into the symbol, I'm just going to have a little go at all of these and show you how to work on the symbols. I'm going to really go and score over these marked sections that I made with the tigers. I really want to get this first impression as strong as I can. So I'm going to go over this and spend a bit of time really pushing this through before I start to work on the other side. So I'm going to do that and come back to you when I've done a bit more to show you that. So I'm going to carry on creating another push from the front over the black marks. I'm going to do that on this one with the ball end of one of the embossing tools, and you can use a small ball end or you can use a large ball end depending on how thick you want this line to come out the back. So you can spend some time, you don't have to do it too quickly. I'm doing it quickly for the camera, but you can do it and spend as much time as you like going over this to make this first impression in the copper. And because it's 0.3mm sheet, it's so lovely to work with. If you feel that's really hard, remember you can sort of heat it up a bit with a torch, with a gas torch, just to sort of soften it again, but don't obviously soften it to melt it, just soften it up and then quench it in cool water and then work with it again. It will just soften it up a bit. So I've made a little bit more of an emboss here, or an indentation in the copper. Now we're going to turn it over and work on the other side to try and help define these lines. Now I've just turned the copper over so you can see that first lot of work. I've worked, pressed into this side several times with the embossing tools over the marks that I made with the Sharpie pen, and here you can see just the first stages of the marks coming out on the other side of the copper, and you need to work this several times, front and back, front and back. So we're going to work on a hard surface now, and just work around to help define these. And I'm going to use a slightly sort of larger ball end of one of these indentation tools just to help me define it. So I'm going to work quite close up to, again it's hard to show you because if I angle the copper it's probably easier, but I don't know when to press, so bear with me. So I'm going to use one of these tools and just go round very carefully. Right, you go in with a smaller tool ball end, press round, not on top of the indentations coming through. So I'm working on the back of the copper and I'm pressing up to where it's pressed through to sort of outline it really, but you don't go over the on the top of it, you just go around it first of all. So I'm going to do that just to make sure I've got it all marked properly. So I need a little bit in here because the T, almost like a little T for tiger, but it's not, it's Chinese tiger. Round, back. Now started to form an outline. Right, I've gone over the tiger another time at least once with this embossing tool. Gone over the pen marks. You can really start to see that I've actually made ingrain. I've made a little bit of slip there, but I'm just going to ignore that and just carry on. We can see I'm pressing over the soft mat for this front indentation, and then we're going to go and work on the harder mat on the other side. So I'm going to come back to that now. You can see that I've gone round this symbol at the back on the hard surface with the ball end of the embossing tool. I've done that for the other side. I haven't done it for the tiger yet, but I will do. And I'm going to go back to the front section, and we're going to repeat more grooved sort of embossing. So on a soft bead mat or a cork mat or anything, we're going to go back over this shape again from the front. So here we go. So I'm going to carry on going over this shape again, like so. Okay, keep going. And I'll do it on the other side, on the mirror image one. So I'm going to work on this section from the front, and then we're going to turn it over back onto the hard surface. So really push, make the most of this pushing section. And then what I'm going to do is now take this away. I'm going to work on the hard mat again. So you can see it's slightly pushed through a bit more. So bring in over the hard surface a small ball end and go around the sides of these indentations a bit more to help really push in with these little areas. You can, if you've got the smallest ball end you can, go into these tiny little areas, the more defined you'll be. So I'm going to go around that again. And that's, remember, that's the reverse one. So this is tiger. No, this is tiger, and this is the reverse tiger. So this, I'm just going to go around this again, so you can see how I'm getting this defined again. Really work hard. I've probably done better on this one, so you can see that it's starting to come out a bit more. So I'm going to push up as much as I can to help define these embossing lines that are coming out towards me. And I'm going to go back again and have another go at the front. Embossing starting to come through, and I'm just going to have another go going back onto the soft surface. And I'm going to continue again another emboss. Let's push through. So I'm going to do that now. It's just one of those things. As soon as when you'll know when it looks good enough to finish with. So you can see I'm doing it again. Another push through all these little lines. You want to use the baro to come into a very fine detail. If you haven't got a ball end, fine up. But these are really quite nice and small, so they'll go in where you need it to go. Push, just push it into place. And then I'm going to so I've just kept on going with that, and then turn it over and have another go at that surround. So bring that back in, push up, really flatten that copper. Some people use a matchstick end. You might have a little flat tool. I haven't got all the embossing tools. I'm just using basic stuff, basic tools, just to get the defined shape of that little Chinese letter for tiger, or symbol for tiger. You can see that's starting to come out quite nicely. So I'm going to go over this a few more times, and the closer you can get to this edge with a little push, the more defined you can get this little symbol. I'm also going to let the little doggy out for it to go outside. I'm just going to go over this a couple more times. And this one as well. Is that really press in? I just need to get that pressed in nicely. I'm going to use both hands just to press in and indent it. I'm going to use both, sorry, you probably can't see, using both hands to press this in. Use just as much force as you can now. But obviously we've got to be a bit careful, because the metal starts thinning as the more you you press. So just working around these little areas close as I can. There's that T, that little X, that little shape between there. I need to define out a little bit. Just get in and just work away at these areas until you feel really happy. Each time you do it, it becomes more defined. So for this one where I want the indentation to come out on the other side of the piece, I've drawn it on the same size as the embossed side. But that's because I want a raised line around this text, because that's going to be the front of the piece. But on this one, this is the back of the piece, and I'm going to create a raised border at the front here. So what I've done is draw around the same 50-cent coin. You can use a 2p, it just ends up being a little bit bigger. Okay, so you can use a 2p if you like, just a slightly smaller coin size. So I'm just going to do exactly the same process for both pieces, using the soft surface to create an embossed circle. So I'm going to go round and do that for both sides. I'll come back to you when I've done that. Just starting off just like this, round, and just make sure you just keep a continuous line if you can. So for this one, I've gone round. I've ended up using the ballpoint pen because it just runs around in a circle nicely. On that one, I've turned it over and just done the same thing for that reverse. The other one, and bring it back to the hard surface, and we're just going to emboss around, or no, to create that embossing, and just flatten round. So again, using the small ball, I'm just going to go close to that line on the inside as I can, just make sure it's a circle. You can see it starts pushing it around nicely. Just keep it as a circle all the way around, inside and the outside of that line. And you may want to use something with a larger ball now, just to keep it all flat. I'm just turning the piece as I go. You can see it's starting to define it as a nice line. You can do all sorts of patterns on the outside, just to keep it as a circle, as a disc, really, for this one. And this is, remember, this is the first one, so we're going to just keep on defining it. I'm just going to do the other one so you can see again what I'm doing around the inside. This isn't quite circular, isn't quite perfect, but in a way, if I slightly cheat and say I'm doing an ancient Chinese piece, you can have a bit of difference to that circle. And I'm going to go back and go over all that, so you can see the start of that. You see the start of the circle, start the circle there on that side. So I'm going to carry on 2 or 3 times, emboss on the surface, make the indentation on the soft surface, and then emboss on the hard surface on the other side. So I'll do that a few times and show you what I've got finished up with. I was just flattening the inner disc for this side a little bit more as I'm working around it, so you can see it's flattening. I will be getting rid of some of this with a bit of sort of sanding anyway, so I'm not worried too much about scratching at this point in time. So I'm keeping on working on this circle, on this circular ridge around the main design. So again, just bring that up with a small ball as much as you can to the edge of that ridge, and then you can use the larger balls just to flatten down flatten down areas. Or what else? You can use the edge of a matchstick. I think some people use that to help you flatten down stuff. You can see that that works. And sometimes a cork around, a wine cork around the area has also helped to help flatten it out and define it. Yes. Right, so I've worked on the symbol of the tiger from the front. That's the sort of totally embossed one, and I've got the other version with the indented symbol and an embossed raised surround. It's not perfectly circular, but I hope you see what I mean. So I've got those two versions. The next thing I'm going to do is work on this tiger now, have a go with that. So I'm going to go through all the lines, do exactly the same thing that I did with the Chinese symbols, and then I'll show you the extra bits I do sort of to push out the nose and work on the eyes and things like that in a minute. So I'm going to go and do the first lot of the embossing and the working around the raised surfaces, and go get as far as I can with that, and then I'll show you some extra bits at the end. So I've done a little bit of more embossing into the, indenting into the surface of the copper on this side. So I'm going to work on the hard surface now and just work on some of the tiger features, just as the very first sort of working around. So just take your time, go on each little part of the tiger, close as you can. I'm also holding my breath while I'm doing this, so you probably can't see. I'm holding my breath to keep my hands still in a way, so I can't talk in a way while I'm doing this. But you can see how I'm getting very close. It's quite therapeutic, really. Close to each line as I work round, press around each line. I'm going to carry on doing that. Now, see, the eye isn't so defined, so I just need a really small ball into this area to get this eye out, and with definition. But you can see how this side is starting to be, I suppose, a bit more defined compared to the other side. There. That's one side I've worked on, the other side isn't so worked on. So I'm going to keep on going and come back to you when I've done that. So I've worked around it a little bit. You can see that on this very first work around, it's starting to become more defined, but it's not perfect yet, because there's some lines, especially I feel around the eyes, perhaps that aren't as defined as other areas. So remember, with as we did with the little symbols, we did repeated scoring on one side and outlining the embossing on the other side until we're happy. So I'm going to go and do this again. I'm going to go back to this side onto the soft surface and press into all those lines again, and then I'm going to go back and redefine the raised lines on the other side. I'm going to do this probably a couple of times on either side. This is the tiger after the second indentation and relief, embossing, or sort of surrounding the relief cycle, and we'll go on to the next one. This is the tiger after the third cycle of embossing and reliefing the embossing. So this is the side. I'm actually going to use this side because I quite like the defined tiger shape. You could use this side if you wanted to have an embossed tiger shape as well. So you can choose at this stage what you'd like to do. So I want to push out this nose a bit more. So I'm just going to use a cork just to flatten down some of the copper around this tiger nicely. Just flatten it down a little bit. So just an end of a wine cork, or will just help you just do that nicely. So So I've just sorted that bit out so it looks a bit nicer. And then now I'm just going to do the same on this side, just smooth it down with a double wine cork. Now, the next thing to do is I'm going to try and push this nose frontwards because I'm going to use this as the front of the tiger. So I'm going to put this over some soft, this release out over some soft mat, and use a larger ball. Just to, if you haven't got those, use some Damien. If you've got some Damien punches, I haven't got the large one out here, but use a Damien punch to do the same thing. So if you've got Damien punches, you can do the same thing. I'm going to really push on this area, just to push this frontwards, and I'm going to do the same with the nose, with a slightly smaller push, 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 push. Just going to push this frontwards. And that brings it out a little bit more as a nose. You can see that defining itself. And I'm going to do some little bits around the face a little bit, but not as much as the nose. Maybe push just the inside part of this face forward. So I'm just going to push there and use a smaller one just to push the front of this face a little bit more forward. I'm not going to do too much. It just creates a little bit more of a defined three-dimensional face. And you can always go back and sort of create the lines back in again. Again on the other side of the tiger as well, to push that back if you go too much. But I think that just gives it a little bit more of a 3D feature to the face. Back, and just want to create this muzzle coming forward a little way. Push, push, just slightly holding it off the paper, off the surface a little bit, just so I can help it push forwards. That's more or less it, isn't it? Okay, so I think that's more or less done. Let's have a look. Just what could we do? Make sure these little eyes are punched in a little bit more. You can use a doming punch and use a hammer punch if you like. But I'm just using a pressure here just to create an indentation. I know then it will pick up any pigment I put onto the copper. This bit could be a bit more defined, so I'm going to flatten this down. You can see how it's just been pushed out a little bit more too much. So I'm going to do that and then flatten that down a bit better. So I think we're more or less ready with that tiger shape to create the pendant. So the next thing I want to do is create a border around it, and we're going to do the same sort of thing that we did for this one, in that I want to put the border, I want a relief, kind of a raised border around this indented tiger, because I use the indented tiger for the inside part of the pendant, but I want a raised border around it. So I'm actually going to draw along the back of this now with a ruler. So I'm going to mark this out with a ruler and then come back to you. So I'm drawing with permanent marker around the tiger in a little square and using a ruler, and you can use this, and I've drawn the line on the raised side because I want the raised border to be around this indented side, because this is going to be the front. So I'm just going to do all that same process we did for the other for the rest of it. So we're just going to use the ruler actually to help me make those first scoring marks with the ballpoint pen, just like so. Hold everything stable, turn the piece. These are quite easy to do when they're straight lines. It really is. It just takes less time. The tiger is probably the most time-consuming part of it. Of course it is. So because it's got the most detail in, and that one, and then we're just going to work on it exactly the same way that we did about 3 or 4 cycles of pushing it in with the biro or embossing tool, and then going around it on the other side. So I'm going to do that and then come back to you when that's done. I've done the embossing and relief cycle a couple of times. I've used a nice champagne cork around the outside because it's quick and easy to do. It's quick and or prosecco cork around the outside, so it's quick and easy to work with. And then on the inside, you just got to have a bit more care. I've used a sort of medium to small ball along the edge here, just taking it slowly, especially when it's a little bit close to the tiger design itself. It's not the end of the world. There we go. And there, and then you can rub a cork over the inside edge if you want to, just keeping it close to the line of the edge. That's pretty well defined. I'm going to go and do this once more and then come back and we're ready to start cutting things out. Right, here's the embossed and framed tiger, or it's actually a relief, I suppose. That's the embossed side, I suppose. But we're going to use this side and for the design. And we need to sort of cut it out. We need to do a little bit of texturing as well to create that sort of soft fairy appearance that I've got on this example. So we're going to do that in a minute as well. So we just need to sort of cut this out. And we can use cutters if you like, or a saw, and I'll show you the two different ways of doing it.